Hey everybody, this is Mac Lake. Welcome back to my channel where we bring you tips, tools, and techniques helping you develop more and better leaders. Today I want to talk to you about a technique that I've been using for several years, and when I started using this, it took my training to a whole nother level. I call it the 5 hats of follow-up questions. Have you ever sat through a training session or a small group where the facilitator is asking questions and people answer, and then the facilitator does one of two things? He just looks at the participants and nods and waits for somebody else to answer, or he or she nods and then just restates what the person said in their answer. I think there are 2 reasons that facilitators struggle asking follow-up questions. Number 1 is they don't understand the purpose of follow-up questions. The purpose of follow-up questions is not for discussion, it's for discovery. And when we begin to understand that follow-up questions are designed to help your learners discover something new, then that takes follow-up questions to a whole nother level. But the second reason they struggle with it is they've never been taught a technique for asking follow-up questions. So that's what I want to help you with in this video. So there are 4 steps I want to recommend. Launch, listen, ask, and squeeze. Step number 1 is really simple. You're going to ask the launching question. Now, whenever you're doing training, many times the students are provided a workbook or questions in advance that they have to think through. So when you're doing the training, you ask them some of those questions. So that's the launching question. It's a question that they've already thought through. So let's say that we're doing a training on how to identify your God-given strengths. One of the launching questions in the pre-work might be, what is your number 1 God-given strength? So I'm going to ask that question. And after I ask that question, I'm going to begin to listen. And that leads me to step number 2. Now, step number 2 is I'm going to listen for a trigger word. Now, a trigger word is a word in the student's answer or a phrase that I'm just curious about. I'm curious about why they use that word. I'm curious about maybe an emotion that they were expressing. Sometimes in their answer, you can sense a fear, or you can sense a hesitation, an anxiety, a disappointment. Sometimes you sense confidence. Sometimes you sense excitement. So I want to lean into those things based on a word that they're saying. And so when I do that, I'm leaning in based on curiosity to try to guide them to a discovery. Let me give you an example of that. Our launching question was, what is your number 1 God-given strength? Their answer might be, well, I'm not sure. I've been told I'm a good communicator, but recently somebody told me that I was good at administration and organizing things. To tell you the truth, I've never taken time to find my greatest strength and really not sure where to start. Now, as I listen to that, I hear several potential trigger words to choose from. There's not sure, there's communicator, administration or organization, never taken the time, or not sure where to start. So I'm simply going to choose one of those words that gets my curiosity the most, and I'm going to ask a follow-up question based on that word, which is step 3. Ask a follow-up question. Now, here's the great thing about this technique. I've got 5 different options for follow-up questions. I call it the 5 hats of follow-up. So when I have my trigger word in my mind, now I'm going to put on one of these hats and ask a follow-up question to lead my student to a place of discovery. First is the fisherman's hat. This is what I call the point of view question. Here, you're fishing for the learner's point of view or their perspective on a specific topic. Now, your desired outcome is you want the learner to discover the obstacles or opportunities regarding their development. Or sometimes these discoveries can be pertaining to their feelings or their emotions as well. Let me give you a couple of fisherman hat examples. One might be, why do you believe that way? Another one might be, what about that experience was good or bad for you? I'm just seeking their point of view. Now, the second hat you can put on is the reporter hat. I call this the story question because I'm seeking to get a story out of the learner. I want to discover their level of experience or their exposure to this topic or whatever we're talking about. And the desired outcome that I'm aiming at is to have the learner discover specific insights and principles from their prior experience that connect with the new learning insights that we're trying to teach. A couple of examples of these types of questions would be, where have you experienced that in the past? Or who have you seen do that well? Or who have you seen do that poorly? That's going to draw a story out of your learner, and then you can drive them to an insight. The third hat is the physician's hat. I call this the self-assessment or the self-analysis question. Here you're seeking to help the learner diagnose and discover a strength or a growth area. The desired outcome is you want them to discover their strengths or growth area by doing a self-assessment of their own skill or their own attitude. Again, a couple of examples of a physician hack question would be, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being highest, how would you describe your skill level in this area? Or another question might be, how would you grade yourself on this? A, B, C, D, or F, and why? The fourth hat is the pilot's hat. This is the action follow-up question. You're seeking to help them discover a relevant action step or make a decision that will promote further growth or development or insights. And the desired outcome is the learner will discover the direction they need to take, the next steps they need to take in order to grow. A couple of questions here, for example, would be, to make real progress in this area, what's the most significant step you could take? Or what are the most important steps you need to take over the next 90 days? These are great examples of a pilot hat question. The fifth hat is the contractor hat. And here you're seeking to help your learner build a list, a framework, or a defense. And the desired outcome here is to help your learner formulate or brainstorm a list that will help give them deeper insights about whatever topic we're talking about. And the types of questions that you can use here, for example, are, what are the 4 mistakes people commonly make with this? Or what are 3 excuses people commonly give? Or what are 5 reasons people believe this? Those are some great examples of the contractor hat type of question. Okay, we ask our launching question, we listened and we identified a trigger word, and then we chose one of the 5 hats and we ask a follow-up question. That leads us to step 4, where we're going to squeeze. We're going to squeeze as much as we can out of that answer. Let me illustrate this with each of the 5 hats. Let's go back to our sample launching question. What is your number 1 God-given strength? And they reply, I'm not sure. I've been told I'm a good communicator, but recently somebody told me that I was good at administration and organizing things. To tell you the truth, I've never taken the time to find my greatest strength. I'm not really sure where to start. Now, as I listen to this answer, I'm going to choose the word time as my trigger word. And I'm going to choose to use the fisherman hat as my follow-up question. So I might ask, why do you think you haven't taken the time to discover your strength? And they might answer something like, well, to be honest with you, I just have really never thought about identifying my strengths. So I'm going to squeeze. So I turn to the group and I just ask them, hey guys, how does it impact somebody when they haven't fully discovered their number 1 God-given strength? That's going to lead to some great discussion. Now let me illustrate this using the reporter hat. This time I want to illustrate it by using the word communicator as my trigger word. In my follow-up question, I'm going to try to draw a story out of them. So I'm going to ask, tell us the story about that time someone said you had a communication strength. So he might say something like, well, I was leading a devotion at my church one time, and this guy Bob came up to me afterwards and said he really enjoyed the devotion, and he thought I was a really good communicator. And he began to tell me that it isn't just what you communicate, it's how you communicate that mattered. And he felt like I communicated good information, but he said I also communicated in a way that impacted him as well. And that just really meant a lot to me. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to take his answer and I'm going to squeeze more out of that. So I'm going to ask him, what are 2 or 3 insights you gained from that encounter with Bob? That's going to lead him to think at a deeper level about that encounter he had with his friend. Now let me illustrate it using the physician's hat. Again, we go back to our launching question, the same answer, but this time I'm going to choose trigger word communication and administration. So I ask, if you could put communication and administration side by side, which would you score higher in as a strength? And then he might answer, well, that's really tough. I'm probably 3 as a communicator and a 3.2 in administration. So now, again, I'm going to squeeze. So I'm going to ask, if you could only choose one to grow in, which would excite you the most and why? That's going to drive him to some discovery that's really going to be beneficial. Now let me illustrate the pilot's hat. Now I'm going to choose the trigger word communication and administration again, but this time using my pilot's hat, I'm asking this question. What 3 action steps could you take that will help you discover if communication or administration is your primary strength? Now once he gives me the answer, I'm going to squeeze and I'm going to say, which of these steps will be the most challenging for you to complete? That's a great question because it's going to really challenge him to think through the action steps that he needs to take and potential obstacles that will be in the way. And finally, let me illustrate the contractor hat. This time I'm choosing the trigger word, I don't know where to start. And the follow-up question, I'm going to turn to the group and say, many people struggle not knowing how to identify their strengths. Let's build a list of 4 things someone could do to identify their strengths. Once the group builds the list, then I'm going to squeeze and I'm going to ask this follow-up question. Which of these would be your next step? And let everybody answer. So hey, that's the 5 hats technique. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, it takes time to learn this, time and practice. So choose 1 hat each week and give it a try. Practice at dinner, practice at work, practice in your small group, and over time, you're gonna watch your students go from discussion to great levels of discovery. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like it, subscribe also so that you can catch all of our videos that'll be coming out. And if you would like a copy of the 5 hats worksheet, then go to the description below and there'll be a link where you can download that and use that tool as you continue to learn this technique. Thanks again for joining me.